Talktainment Radio Worldwide Sound. Talktainmentradio.com. We give you a reason to come. The world's greatest radio. We give you a reason to stay. Radio, the way it should be heard. You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of TalkTainmentRadio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
This is The Compensatory Concept with Mr. Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio, the way it should be heard. And now, Mr. Neely Fuller.
If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Only confuse you. Only confuse you.
Good morning, and welcome to TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio, and you are in touch with the compensatory concept. I am Mr. Bobby, the compensatory concept with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Yeah, my goodness gracious. And by the way, this is radio the way it should be heard. We have Mr. Fuller on the line, and we just cannot wait to get into today's show. And we'll start off by saying, Mr. Fuller, how are you this morning?
I'm still learning.
Man, you know what? Truer words were never spoken. Still learning. And so am I. It just seemed like the more I learn, the more I realize that I do not know. And man, oh man, this is really something. If you, my listening audience, and thank you, or our listening audience, and thank you, if you'd like to get in touch with the program, you can certainly do that by calling 1-877-932-9766. And Mr. Fuller would be happy to answer any questions, or try to answer any questions that you have, according to his take and his logic. Mr. Fuller, you know, in the opening, you mentioned if you do not understand racism, which is white supremacy, what it is and how it works. You mentioned the word that anything that you, think well about that will only confuse you?
Everything else that you understand will only confuse you because everything in the universe is connected.
Yes.
So the biggest connection between the people of the known universe as it is right this minute in 2014 is something called racism in the form of white supremacy, which means you mistreat people based on color. That's the dominant political and religious force among the people of the planet. And everything is connected with that. There's nothing that's not connected with it.
So,
and, I list 9 areas of activity:
yes.
Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And if you look at any of these areas of activity, the interaction between people, what I call people activity, whether you pick economics or education or labor or sex or religion, these people, everyone on the planet, is engaged in one or more of these areas of activity each and every minute of the day.
Yes.
And all of these areas of activity, when it comes to people of color, are dominated by people who believe in mistreating people based on color. That's what it is.
Okay.
That's what we have here.
So to get this straight, anything that you think you understand about racism, if you do not understand what it is and how it works, it's only going to lead you to confusion.
You're going to have confusion.
Yes, sir.
And the racists themselves, that's their specialty.
Yes, sir.
They are masters of deceit. And what is the purpose of deceiving somebody? It's to cause confusion. And then why would you deceive someone in order to cause confusion?
Yes.
Because if you deceive someone, if you fool somebody, and then that person becomes confused, which is the result of being deceived, then you can control that person You can just jerk that person around any which way you want to.
Okay.
Because the person is confused. If a fire alarm goes off in a building and you don't know where the fire exit is, and there's someone who has set off the fire alarm, and they're the only ones who know where the exit is, and everybody else is confused, then the person who knows where the exit is the most powerful person in that building.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, now, you've also mentioned on more than one occasion on this broadcast that not all white people are racist. Now, I want to reiterate that. You have mentioned that all white people are not racist. Now, why do you say that?
Because I can't assume that, because I don't know all white people. And then, if I follow the logic, as a white baby, a baby just born, the baby is white. Babies are born into the world who are white. Is that a racist? Is that a white supremacist? Is that a person that tells me what to do each and every minute of each and every day, that governs what I do in economics, what kind of job I will have and whatnot? The baby just got here. And the baby is white.
Yes.
Also, so I do not believe that baby is a white supremacist.
Okay.
I don't believe that. I have no reason based on logic to believe that.
Okay.
No way. And then there's another person. Say there's the head of what we call the Ku Klux Klan.
Yes, sir.
All right? And that head becomes senile. I mean, over the years, he becomes older and older and older, like we all do. And then, next thing you know, he's in a wheelchair. Next thing you know, he has Alzheimer's. He can't remember anything. He doesn't know a spoon from a fork. He doesn't know yellow from brown, or black from green, or black from white. That person most likely is not a racist anymore, even though he used to be. I can't charge that person with being a racist now.
Okay.
When he doesn't know a spoon from a fork. He doesn't even know where he is, or even knows that he is a he.
Yes.
Or he is a person. He doesn't know anything. His mind is gone. He's become, the ultimate in senility, they call it.
Yes.
Okay? And I would look at that person being wheeled down a hospital ward, and they will say, well, that's the grand wizard of such and such a segment of the Ku Klux Klan. And I'll say, no, he isn't. That's a person who is sickly and actually needs a lot of help. And it might be even a black lady wheeling him down the hall. I mean, somebody who used to be much feared and all like that. And so you say, no, you can't charge him with that crime. You can say that he used to be eligible, but that's not a racist.
Okay. All righty. I bring that up because I have done some research on each one of these positions that you had spoken about in the beginning: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And one of the things that I have discovered, and you mentioned it, and I ask you this, not all white people are racist. I looked at a presentation by a man by the name of Mike Rose. Now, Mike Rose is, even right now, he's a recognized American education scholar, and currently at UCLA Graduate School of Education and Information Studies. And he has done a couple of papers, and one of the papers that he did, or has done, was How Wars Are Made, and he focused in on Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And as I read this piece, and I remember my mother and everybody glorified Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Well, he was dead when I, was born, but they glorified him. And when I read Mike Rose's piece on that, he talked about World War II and then World War I. I realized that everything that you had mentioned, Mr. Fuller, in that areas of human activities, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, this man identified every single one of those areas in his dissertation. And one of the things that just was so shocking to me, and this is a white man talking, is that it indicated in the article that even white people are deceived by the racist. And that just kind of blew me away, because again, he went into every area, broke down the Roosevelt family and all the things that happened prior to me coming into existence, but the things that you have been speaking about for years, even before I knew you. He talked about and exposed it. Even the creation of, I remember you saying the so-called Middle East and how it got started. He addressed all these issues with facts and documents, historical documents that proved exactly what you're saying. Now, I know you haven't, read or I believe you haven't read anything about Mike Rowe, but when you were coming up, you were alive. I mean, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was alive when you, in your time, when he, for example, the New Deal, you heard about that, you lived through that. What was that like?
Well, actually, I benefited from it because I remember as a little boy, a smaller boy, the trucks coming down the street in front of Dunbar Grade School, elementary school in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and there were white men on these trucks, and they stopped, and the trucks were full of apples, and we were told by our teachers, go out and get the apples. So we went out, we didn't have anything to get the apples in, so we emptied the waste baskets that we had of the papers that had been in the waste basket, and then we rushed out in front of the school and got apples in the waste baskets. And we filled those waste baskets up. And I was wondering, they are giving away apples? Where are apples coming from that they are giving them away to colored people over here in the colored section and going around to the schools and giving away apples to the students? And we were always hungry.
Yes, sir.
So we took those apples, but they said, well, they come from President Roosevelt. That's what we called him at the time. And and to me, there was only one president, and that was President Roosevelt. During my era, because he served those lengthy terms.
Yes.
And so, me being very young, I didn't think that there would ever be another president. When I thought of a president, when you say president, you meant President Roosevelt. That's how we pronounce it.
Okay.
And so, President Roosevelt is giving us these apples. So we were glad to get them. And we ate those apples, like you wouldn't believe. And but they came around just a couple of times, and they didn't come around anymore. But I remembered that.
Okay.
It stood out in my mind. And it was, he produced things like the WPA, and I heard something about that. I didn't know what it meant. But they said, well, those are jobs for people that don't have jobs.
Yes.
And I said, well, this is whoever he is. He's up there in a place called Washington, D.C., and he's doing these things, and some colored people are getting something out of it. So, I hope he can keep doing it.
Yes.
So that was it.
Yes. Well, I brought that up because Mike Rose, as we say, dropped the science on Roosevelt and why you got those apples and everybody else, why the WPA, what was behind that. And I encourage everybody, especially since you're listening online, check him out. Mike Rose, How Wars Are Made. It is a lengthy article. However, it addresses everything that Mr. Fuller has talked about. Every single thing, but it goes into detail. And you'll find out why Mr. Fuller received those apples. Let's go to the phone lines. Okay, caller, we have a caller. We have a couple of callers. Go ahead, caller. What is your question for Mr. Neely Fuller this morning? And good morning.
Hello?
Yes, you are on.
I am?
Yes, you are.
All right. I've been grappling with the theories here about what to do in the 9 areas. And it seems to me that performing as you suggest in any of those 9 areas it just doesn't seem to increase nor decrease the likelihood something negative won't happen to you. So if you leave this up to the deference of the person who's doing the mistreatment, it's highly unlikely that they'll stop doing it. And I think maybe the most practical approach is to be prepared for all the worst and act accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Fuller, you care to address that, please?
I didn't get the question.
Caller,
was it a statement?
Well, what I'm saying is, given how you say you should respond in the 9 areas, it doesn't seem to increase nor decrease the likelihood that you will be mistreated. I guess I wonder how this is an adequate defense when you leave this up to the person who's doing the mistreatment to somehow mitigate their activity towards you. It seems to me that the best preparation would be to assume the worst and act accordingly.
Okay. Mr. Fuller?
The best would, if I understand what he said assume the worst and act accordingly. Did he say that?
Essentially, yes.
Yes, that's correct. That's what I mean by having a code. You always wake up every morning knowing that you're in a war. That's the first order of business. We're not in peacetime. There's no such thing as that. We're in the middle of a war that never has been stopped.
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing as peace being declared. People declare peace, but I'm talking about in a functional sense.
Yes, sir.
In reality, ever since the beginning of white supremacy, which is what I call the war, that's the only war that really counts.
Mm-hmm,
that's the war, that's the umbrella war of the entire planet. It's never stopped since the day that it was established. And everything that happens in a war is just a battle. And so the different battles are going on in different fronts. I mean, Ferguson and this and that, but the battles happen every day.
Right.
Every time there's an encounter of conflict between one white person and a non-white person.
Yes.
Every encounter is a part of the war.
Yes, sir.
In fact, even the most, what you might call bland or peaceful encounters, it's an encounter because there's a war going on between white and non-white.
Yes, sir.
Worldwide.
Yes, sir.
It's never stopped.
Never.
I mean, and people say, well, I work with white people every day. We get along fine and all like that. You're in a war, whether you know it or not, because the white supremacists who are running everything have never said that we are declaring a peace. We are continuing the system of white supremacy. So just because there are individual people who are smiling and laughing and joking and whatnot, and they're going to football games together and waving pennants and all like that, doesn't say that there's not a war going on that is never stopped.
All right.
This is the truth of the matter. So what we need is codification to wrap this war up. It's got to be accelerated, and that's what I try to write with my book, the textbook for victims of white supremacy. We have to accelerate the pace in ridding the world of racism and replacing it with a world of justice.
Well, who's in the best position possible to initiate the justice coming in? If you say that, based on your codification, that there's a certain manner you should respond to all activity, and it really doesn't make a difference, ultimately, whether it will work or not, because you don't have any say-so over the person who's doing the mistreatment. How is this going to bring about a new change or a new order as far as the justice coming in?
Okay.
I mean, it seems you're leaving it totally up to the person who's doing the mistreatment to somehow maybe have a change of heart that we haven't seen, and it's probably likely we won't see it.
Thank you for your call. And
All right.
Go ahead. Thank you for your call. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller. You want to answer that, and then I'll have something to say about that.
That's what a counter-racist code is
exactly.
for.
Exactly.
See, the racism will not move from its position on its own. Like Frederick Douglass said, hey, you have to struggle against it. You have to bring about this change. So, how do you bring about the change? Well, first of all, you study how something is put together. Racism is put together by people.
Study. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And then the next thing you do is come up with a counter-racist code, which is what I've tried to do with the book that I put out called The Textbook for Victims of White Supremacy. Now, what would this code consist of? The way you talk every day, starting with the way you talk. We have to change the way that we talk. The way that we talk, that's the victims, that is, of racism. The way that we talk to each other, the things that we say, the things that we don't say, and also the things that we say to people who we suspect are racist. The way that we talk to them, the things that we do, the things that we don't do. Is everything in the universe is a matter of doing and not doing. Everything. Each and every day. And saying and not saying. You change your words. You change your sentences. You change your intent. I mean, there's certain things you do, certain things you don't do. Certain things you say, certain things you don't say. And I'm talking about each and every day.
Each and
wherever
every day.
You happen to be.
Yes.
That's what a code is. We don't have one. We just say anything any kind of way. All right? And with no purpose most of the time. Just talking just to be talking. That's got to stop.
It's got to stop.
Right.
You're listening to The Compensatory Concept with Neely Fuller, Jr., and if you'd like to get in contact with us, you may do that by calling 1-877-932-9766. And just to add on to what Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. just said, Mike Rose addresses everything in detail with Mr. Fuller just said. It will help you understand what's going on. And as Mr. Fuller just said, you need to study first. You need to study it and the tactics that they use. And Mike Rose brings this out. It's called How Wars Were Made. It addresses it. Everything. That's why I'm so excited this morning. Okay, let's go to next caller, number 2. Go ahead, caller. What is your question for Mr. Fuller? You got to turn your radio down so we can hear you. We can't hear you. Turn your radio down so we can hear you. Go ahead. We can't hear. Okay, I can't hear him. I tell you what, caller number 2, you need to call back and then cut your radio down because I can't hear you. All right, caller, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead. You're on.
Hello, Mr. Fuller. I wanted you to go over the strategies because I feel like the strategies, I don't know, why didn't you include them in the book? And I think the strategies have helped me with to think more clearly, get more clarity on countering racism. And I also wanted to ask you, was there any new strategies? I know you have the strategies of racial dislocation. What else is there? Sexual confusion and racial classification, confusion, and the other one is population tailoring. But I was just wondering if you know of any new strategies that the races are trying to implement that we should look out for. And also, my question is, so I want you to answer that question first. Why didn't
Wait a minute. One question at a time. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Any new strategies?
No, the races. These are just labels for things that people do.
Okay.
And I said that the racist strategies for confusion, but everything that they do. See, the basic things, like I said in the textbook for victims of white supremacy, the basic strategies that the white supremacists use is deceit and violence.
Yes, sir.
In other words, their main strategy, because it's much more efficient, and that is to deceive their victims.
Absolutely.
And they do this in all areas of activity. That's economics. In other words, fool you. You get ready to buy a car, all right? You're going to get deceived. You get nervous when you get ready to buy a car or get ready to buy a house because they have what they call small print. What is the small print for? The small print is to deceive. Somebody's getting ready to fool you. They have it all set up like that.
Yes, sir.
Okay? They're not going to tell you the truth about what is really going on right there in front of you.
They will not.
Okay? And they do this in all areas of activity. The second area of that's under economics, you might say. Economics is how you spend your time and energy, according to the code. I mean, in other words, I have to give definitions to words that fit. Okay, so that's one that I did. Economics is just how you use time and energy, not just how you spend money and whatnot. But in the educational field, the second area of activity, what is the racist strategy there? Same thing, to deceive you. They send you to school, but they won't tell you all of the things you need to know.
Hallelujah. Tell it, man. Tell it.
They tailor everything that they're teaching you so they will serve them when you come out with your paper in your hand, and will make the system of white supremacy stronger, not weaker.
That's right.
All right? And they tell you, and actually they brag about the things that they do that shouldn't be done. They brag about killing Indians and taking their land. They actually brag about it. I mean, you're sitting right there at a college being taught this, and you're paying money that you will owe for what you call student loans and all like that.
Oh, yes.
To learn that we took from people, we used direct violence, and we also used deceit. Sit down with the chief and say, have a drink, chief. I mean, we're going to have Thanksgiving, and we're going to have peace, and we're going to get along from now on, and on and on and on. All you have to do is just come to the table and talk to us, and we will, negotiate, and that everything will be fine, and all you have to do is have a swig of this whiskey, and then sign here. And this is what you call a treaty, meaning we are going to treat you correctly, and so then we're going to have peace. And then they say smoke the peace pipe and all of this. Yes. Next thing you know, they kept losing and losing. And the people who were called Indians saying, every time we get together and negotiate, I don't really know what you're talking about. It's like you selling me a used car. I mean, and you're pumping this up and saying this and saying that and saying the other, and I don't really know what you're doing. That's that confusion, that deception.
Yes.
Okay? And they say, Chief, you got it all wrong. We are friends. You just don't understand what real friendship is.
Right. And see, they do that in all the 9 areas that Mr. Fuller has talked about. My young sister, before I get to your second question, I'm serious. If you look under what Mike Rose, R-O-S-E, has written on how to make war, I'm telling you right now, it addresses everything that Neely Fuller Jr. just talked about in detail, including what he just said about the Indian. I read it. I saw it. Particularly in World War I, they address all of those issues and your questions, that you have about that. And as he mentioned, you need to study that. Then you can begin to understand how this thing is before you formulate your strategy against that. Your second question, then we'll have to move on.
Okay. My second question is, as far as the telltale signs, I know we can't ever say that a person is a racist because you can't prove it, and then another person can come along and dispute it. So you just call them a suspect racist, and that does make sense. But when you're talking about the telltale signs of a racist, how can I, if I'm worried about a non-white person who is engaged in a relationship or sexual play or sexual, relationship with a white person or, anti-sex, how can I just let them know that the telltale sign of a racist is one that engages in sex with a white person?
All right, thank you for your call. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
Okay, I mean non-white person.
Okay, thank you.
Please don't hang up.
I hope that I understand the question. Okay, but she said something about someone being in a sexual relationship. Is that correct?
Yeah, she's gone, but she did mention a sexual relationship.
All right, a sexual relationship between white and non-white. Now, this is going to fly in the face of what you call conventional wisdom and what's already, prevalent. But I still say it in my textbook. Sexual intercourse between white and non-white in a system of white supremacy makes the system of white supremacy stronger. That's a flat statement. It's either true or false.
Either true or false. All righty, you hear that music, so you know what that means. It's break time. TalkTainmentRadio.com. Check us out on WCRS FM 98.3 Wednesday and Sunday evenings. Blogs and podcasts are available. Download TalkTainmentRadio.com app to your cell or tablet. Listen, we go where you go. Radio the way it should be heard. Stay right there. We're going to have more of your questions. Don't forget, look up Mike Rose. All that and more coming up next on TalkTainmentRadio.com.
TalkTainmentRadio.com is the premier internet radio platform offering 40-plus talk radio-style programs professionally produced, optimized for online distribution, featuring Columbus, Ohio on-air personalities. TalkTainmentRadio.com offers listeners diverse programming options covering topics such as arts and culture, love, life and relationships, technology, religion, paranormal activities, local and national politics, women's issues, alongside health and wellness. Listeners can access their favorite TalkTainmentRadio.com programs free of cost through the website. Download the TTR app to your cell phone and you can take us wherever you go. We have programs on demand to fit your schedule through our podcast. The address is TalkTainmentRadio.com.
With the service you get from State Farm, you might think our car insurance costs more, but with discounts up to 40%, you may find it even costs less. Call me, State Farm Agent Nikki Ogundiyle, at 614-274-7130 or 1-800-717-3497. Let's see how much you can save.
If you're not facing your mortgage issues, this can be the most terrifying sound in the world. It means you've fallen behind. It means hope is dwindling. It means you're another call closer to losing your home to foreclosure. Fortunately, there's hope. If you need real help and guidance, call 1-888-995-HOPE. That's 1-888-995-4673. Because nothing is worse than doing nothing. A public service announcement brought to you by NeighborWorks, the ad council in this station.
In the small town of Elmira, New York, a boy was born into an all-American family. The odds of him opening his own clothing store at the age of 18? 1 in 138,000. Excited to be a part of pop culture, he packed for the big city. The odds of him achieving his dream in the fashion industry? 1 in 23 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 68. I am Tommy Hilfiger, and my family is affected by autism. I encourage you to learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs. Early diagnosis can make a lifetime of difference.
Brought to you by Autism Speaks, the Ad Council, and TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio.
Goodwill is a global social services enterprise and the leading nonprofit provider of job training programs and career services in the United States and Canada. To pay for its program, Goodwill sells donated clothes and other household items in more than 2,700 stores and online at shopgoodwill.com. Goodwill uses the revenue earned from these sales to fund job training, employment placement services, and other community programs. The goal of the campaign is to increase goods donations to Goodwill, inspire an emotional connection to the Goodwill brand, and to elevate preference for Goodwill.
Supporting minority education. I'm Sean Booker, dammit, from the Melting Pot. I'm here to tell you that as the mother of a high school senior, I know due to financial circumstances, many of America's deserving minority students do not have access to a college education. Since 1944, the United Negro College Fund has sought to provide one. Since 1972, the beginning of this campaign, UNCF has helped more than 300,000 talented students earn a college degree. I'm Sean Booker, dammit. Give a helping hand.
Life insurance. It's one of those subjects that make people want to, change the subject. Are you sure you have enough? That's why I, State Farm Agent Nikki Ogundiyle, focus on the benefits of life insurance. I ask people to think about life without having to sell the house insurance, or life without having to give up college insurance. Find out how the benefits of life insurance can live on for your family. Call me, Nikki Ogundiyle, at 614-274-7130 in Central Ohio or 1-800-717-3497 in surrounding areas. Put the life back in life insurance.
The United Independent Compensatory Code System concept by Neely Fuller is considered as one of the substantial and basic books for understanding and effectively countering racism. Neely Fuller will turn upside down everything you've heard and everything you think you know about racism and how it works. Call area code 202-484-5461. 202-484-5461.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
Go ahead. Make my day.
You got the power.
Oh, man. Phone lines are jumping. I was talking to my producer, and the information, he already knew that about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I didn't. I'm just shocked. But anyway, welcome back to TopTeamRadio.com, the world's greatest radio, and that's radio the way it should be heard. I'm Mr. Bobby, and along with me is the man himself, Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. And if you would like to get in contact with us, you may do that by calling 1-877-932-9766. Before we move on, let's see. This is this show is live. Hey, Ed, next 2 weeks we won't be on. Is that correct? Okay, so the next time that we will be live will be January the 7th, 2015. So mark that down. So any shows you hear after today will all be either in the podcast or repeat shows. So you get a chance to hear yourself again. So remember that. Okay, and again, somebody asked me, again, who's that guy I was talking about in the name of the book? Well, his name is Mike Rose, and the book was How Wars Are Made. You need to read that to understand what Mr. Neely Fuller has talked about in the 9 areas of human activity. He goes into great detail and explains to you how it works. And if you really want to know, you look at that. And speaking about looking at that, Mr. Fuller, your book, the title of it, and how we can get a copy of it.
Yes. Now, my book is called The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. And those words are explained in the book.
Yes.
Because they won't mean anything on the surface. But there is a subtitle that's more explicit, and that is, it's a textbook, workbook for thought, speech, and/or action for victims of white supremacy.
Yes.
And you can get it by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. And what will come up on the screen is a brief description of the basic textbook, and then recently I put out a word guide. What I call a counter-racist word guide, how to use words, what questions to ask when people use certain words that I say might cause confusion and whatnot. You want to nail down the words so that there won't be any confusion. And that's what that book is about, is in addition to the basic book. Okay. But you can get the basic book or the additional word guide or both by going to producejustice.com.
Yes, and I highly recommend you do that so that you can be armed with information to know what to do on your next step. Okay, let's go to the phone lines. Okay, caller, you're on with Mr. Neely Fuller. Turn your radio down so you can ask your question. Okay. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, caller. You're on with Neely Fuller Jr. Okay. All right, Galen, give me the other one. Okay, caller, go ahead.
Yeah, how you doing, Mr. Fuller?
I'm still learning.
I got a quick question. How long have you been in D.C.? And the reason why I asked, I just wanted to get your thoughts and comments on Mayor Marion Barry. And I just wanted you to comment and tell me your thoughts about him while he was the mayor of D.C.
Okay, I've been in the D.C. area since 1958. Okay. Before then, I was in the military, and before then, I was in Oklahoma, which is where I was born. And the comments about Marion Barry, the former mayor, who is now deceased, the comments that I have to make about him is that 2 comments that I make about all people who are classified as non-white. He's a victim of white supremacy.
Mm-hmm. Sure is.
And he was the mayor of Washington, D.C., as a victim of white supremacy. That's the badge. That's the way that I describe anybody of color, victim of white supremacy. And that's just about the gist of what I would have to say about anybody of color. Now, if you ask me any details about him, his comings and goings, what I think about him and all like that, I still say the same thing. That's what I mean by codified responses. See, I don't have to do a lot of thinking because I think of the best thing to say. Everything is about the best thing to say. And the best thing I can say about Mr. Barry is that he is a person of color, which makes him a victim of white supremacy, just like I am. That's how I identify myself. When they say, Neely Fuller, what do you say about yourself? I say, in other words, the most distinguishing feature about me, I mean, the thing that you can say about me that just about wrap up everything about me that you would ever want to know that's worth knowing, I'm a victim of white supremacy. That's it.
All righty.
I have one other question.
Okay, go ahead. Quickly.
And the quick question is, if on the job, if I make, say, more than said white person, can that white person be racist towards me since racism is about power? Do I have the right to still call him a racist or white supremacist if I make more than him? So if I'm above him or her and make more than him or her, and I'm a non-white person, just for a fact.
All righty. Mr. Fuller?
Okay, according to what I have written, under no circumstance ever do you call a person a racist or a white supremacist. No circumstance, except, there's exceptions to all rules, as they say, to use a cliche, except when the person says that he or she is one. You never, on a job or anyplace else, accuse of a person of being a racist.
But you can suspect that they are, is that correct?
You can say, what you do is call for an investigation of racism. You don't single out any person.
Mm-hmm.
You say, I have probable cause to believe that there is racism being practiced here. And I would like to have an investigation to find out if that is true. And you say, well, who do you talk to about it? You talk to anyone. You always address your request to whomever has the power to do the investigating.
Okay.
But you never do the investigating yourself. That's a mistake. You let people know that I don't do the investigating. I want somebody else to do the investigating who has the power. Why? Because, first of all, you're not going to have the power. Not under the system of white supremacy.
But if you ask for the investigation, they're going to ask you, why do you want this to be investigated?
You say you have reason to believe that racism is being practiced.
Okay.
But you don't know who the racists are. You're going to ask for assistance in finding out who they are.
Okay.
Will the real racists please step forward? We got some white people here. We got some non-white people here. Now, we want to know, all of us non-white people in this facility, and you keep saying that we're all family here, but we are not family if we have some racists in our midst. So we have to find out who they are.
Wait a minute. So you mean logically, if you ask that question, do you logically think that somebody who is a racist is going to step up and say, okay, I'm a racist?
No.
Okay.
I do not expect that person to do that at all.
Okay.
But you're saying that I have probable cause to believe that racism is being practiced here because I see evidence of it.
Okay.
So you always point to what is happening. You say, now, this has happened. This happened last Monday. This happened. Now, I wonder who's causing this.
Okay.
And you always say, everybody here has a duty to find out who's causing it. See, that's how you put it.
Okay.
You say, I've been told that we have a duty to ferret out racism wherever it happens to be. And so the white people will say, well, wait a minute. I mean, what do you mean we have that duty? You say, oh, yes, we all have the duty because racism is a crime. And we are supposed to ferret out criminals on this job. Because we're not supposed to have any criminals here on the job committing criminal acts on the job. Racism is a universal crime.
Yes.
It's the crime of crimes. Right. There's no bigger crime than that.
Okay, I'm getting a sign here for Brandon. You're listening to The Compensatory Concept with Neely Fuller Jr. exclusively here on TalkTainmentRadio.com. Radio, the way it should be heard. Was that good, Gayla? Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go to another caller. Go ahead, caller. What is your question for Mr. Fuller, please?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, my question is, Mr. Fuller, on page 41 in the code, you talk about the two basic methods of resisting racism. Number one, the four-wallism, and number two, open-airism. Could you just go into further detail on both of those?
Good question.
Methods?
It's on page 41?
Yes, sir. Right underneath
four-wallism. Yes, right.
Yes.
Oh, yes, four-wallism. Four-wallism means the traditional way that black people, non-white people have of what you call resisting racism. And that means you have regular meetings of two or more persons, and then you rent or buy a meeting hall, and you have fundraisings and whatnot in order to finance your operations. And you have a centralized or closed-in activities. In other words, you usually have something called membership, members of the black organization. And you say, well, you're a member, and I'm going to give you a card saying that you're a member. And we will have meetings, regular meetings of that type. And then you will acquire things, supplies and whatnot that you will store. And you will pay dues, maybe, being a member. And you will pay salaries out if you get to be big enough in your organization, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then you will have regular accumulation of funds for legal fees, et cetera, because people will get in trouble usually, and so you want to bail them out of jail and whatnot on account of they were demonstrating or something. And that's what the organization does. And then you will have a leader, usually a leadership. In an organization, you have a leader, a president of the organization or something, or a person who is just called a leader, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, structure. And you will call meetings, and you will have maybe flags or pictures or statues or something, of members of your organizations who have accomplished this and accomplished that.
Yes.
Now, the open air is the United Independent Compensatory system. Mm-hmm. That is the one that I endorse. That's the difference in the two. Now, both of these, open air means what? Everything is addressed to the individual. In other words, you don't have a leader, you become a leader yourself. And you don't go to regular meetings and have dues paying, and you don't rent buildings and all like that. That's too cumbersome, in my opinion. Because then you're beholden to the people who are the landlords, and you're constantly spending a lot of money and time doing what I call housekeeping. Mm-hmm. Just keeping the place, keeping the electricity. We're going to have a meeting tonight. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, everybody's going to come and crowd in these four walls, and you usually even measure, and I say this is always a mistake, you measure your power by the number of people who come to the meetings. You look and say, we got a full house tonight. Look at all these people, this wall-to-wall people. Standing room only. Everybody just, stepping on everybody's toes. And because the leader is speaking, or the leaders, or the committee is speaking tonight, and we are talking about the issues, and they go back and forth and whatnot. And meanwhile, the heating bill is going up, and the rent is going up because the white supremacists, they control all of that.
Yeah.
And so you're spending a lot of time doing that. And you come away from the meeting, say, that was a good meeting. Did you hear speaker number 6? Boy, did he lay it out, or did she lay it out? And that goes on and on and on. Right. Now, this is effective to a small degree, in my opinion. And it's effective to a small degree because it does inspire people as individuals, because when the people leave the meeting, they are individual persons.
Yes, that's right.
So it depends on what was said at the meeting. These individual persons usually go out and do a few things, but usually, and this is where the problem is, they look to that committee that they just left with all the speakers that did the talking about what should be done. They look to them on a day-to-day basis to be solving the problem. The open air thing is you become a solver of the problem.
Yes, sir. You become that.
You become the entire organization. Now, that's a new concept. Black people are not used to that concept at all. We've never really had it.
Right.
Where you codify everything that you would get out of that meeting, and you put it within yourself as an individual, and you don't depend on anybody to do anything, because you're going to do it all.
And it's not going to happen overnight either.
No, but I'm saying everything that's going to be done. Now, I got that idea one day when someone, a few months after I had a NAACP card membership, it cost me $2. I was walking around with that card in my pocket. Mac Parker was lynched in Mississippi. First thing that I said to someone that I talked to, because I was very distraught about it and upset and whatnot. I was very young. And I said, you hear about a fellow named Mac Parker in Mississippi being dragged out of the jail and beaten to death and thrown into a river? He said, yeah, I heard about that. I read about it. I said, that somebody ought to do something about that. I said, I wonder what the NAACP is going to do. And then it hit me. I had an NAACP card in my pocket, and the answer was swift in coming. The NAACP, in the form of Neely Fuller, was going to do absolutely nothing, because I wasn't going to Mississippi and see about anything.
Yeah.
All right? So then that's when I first got the first germ of how do you fight racism? You fight it through our organizations. Well, what is an organization? It's people. And who are the people? The people are people like myself carrying this card around. Now, what are you going to do, Neely Fuller? Are you going down there and face that sheriff and get in his face and tell him about your army that you got that's going to sweep through here and clean up this mess? In other words, make demands, not requests. See, when you make demands, like like Don Corleone, they said he makes a request one time. The next thing you know, you're going to have a horse's head in your bed.
Yes.
Or something like that. That's when you make a demand. In other words, you got muscle.
All right.
All right. I didn't have the muscle. I didn't even know where the muscle came from. So in explaining what the open air is, I'm saying each and every person who is of color on this planet has to become an organization within him or herself.
Okay.
That's the point that I'm making.
All right. Thank you for your call, caller. Okay, let's go to the next caller. Who's up? Yeah, go ahead.
May I be heard?
Yes, sir. Make it quick. I got about a couple of minutes.
All right. First of all, I would like to say that Dr. Neely Fuller, it is definitely an honor and a privilege to be speaking to you. I've been hearing from you for a while, and I've got your book. And my question is, this morning is, my thoughts is on revolution. If there is an actual revolution between whites and non-white, I mean, have you considered that? Because I didn't read that in the book.
Okay, thank you for your call. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
Well, revolution just means revolving. I mean, what I do is just simply say, I try to be explicit in what I say. I say, replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. And in order to do that, you have to codify everything that you do and say among black people and among white people. In other words, all the do's and don'ts. Like the Ferguson thing. People keep saying, well, let's demonstrate. Okay, well, after you demonstrate, then what? But see, in Ferguson itself, the people of Ferguson, the black people who are still going to be there, they have to interact with white people.
Yeah.
Now, interact how? See, it comes down to what you say and what you do.
What you do.
Certain things you don't say, certain things you do say.
Exactly.
Now, what do I do when law enforcement? I'll just where the rubber meets the road, because everything is about doing and saying rather than just sloganeering. All right, if I'm pulled over by law enforcement, what do I do? If I'm in Ferguson or any other place, first thing I remember that I am in enemy territory called the system of white supremacy. And I am a captured soldier in enemy territory. Therefore, I act like it. I do what I'm told.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get away from that. Do what you are told.
Do what you are told.
Why? Because that's the only thing that's going to work.
All right.
In that type of setting.
We have about 5 minutes, so let's go to the next caller. Go ahead, caller.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir. So, Mr. Fuller, if
I was on hold, I was able to get my question in.
Is what the gentleman was asked earlier and you described as four-wallism, then what's church?
Say that again?
So, you were describing four-wallism.
Yes.
What's church then? Because I see similarities. How do you explain church then?
Good question.
Okay,
Good question.
All right. Okay, now we're getting to it. When people ask me, sometimes I am asked, do I go to church? And I have a 3-sentence response. I have been to church. I stopped going to church. I never left the church. Now, people want an explanation for that, because that sounds weird on the surface. I have been to church. That's number one. I stopped going to church. That's number two. I never left the church. That's number three. So it comes down to words again. What is church? Okay, we usually describe church as a building. That's how we describe it. I'm going to church. I'm going to a building. Okay? When you go to the building, what is in the building? All right? What is in that building that you go to that you call church? Well, there are people in there and some benches and chairs. What else is in there? Well, you come in there and you got a preacher. Okay, what does that preacher do? He gives you the word. Oh, so the church is like a post office. You go to get a message. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, I've been to that building where they have the message. Like the post office. They're sending me a message. There's going to be a messenger there called a preacher, and he's going to give me a message. So I'm going to listen to the message.
Yeah.
Okay, now, what's that part about I stopped going to church? I stopped going to church when I got there. See, if you're already in church, you're not going to church because you're in the church. You are in a church building.
Okay, what about you never left the church quickly?
I never left the church because when I left the post office, I took the message with me.
I got you.
Therefore, you took the post office message with you.
Okay, let's go to caller. Go ahead, caller. You might be the last one, but go ahead. We got about a minute. Go ahead. Go ahead. Get him on. Get the caller on. Go ahead. Who is it? Let Leah. Go ahead. Let them through. We got about a minute and a half. Go ahead, caller. Okay. You're not coming through, so okay. Is that it? Well, we can't get the last caller through. Can we get the last caller through? Yes. Okay. All right. We couldn't get it through. Mr. Fuller, could you talk about your book quickly and how we can get it?
Yes. You can go to producejustice.com, and it's a textbook workbook for victims of white supremacy, and it's addressed under the open-air system, meaning addressed to the individual. It's not addressed to organizations. You can't form an organization around the code concept. That would defeat the purpose of the concept. You can have people who are in an organization use, just like they use any book or any guide in the organization. But the book is not addressed to organizations.
Right.
Or setting up an organization built around the book. There are plenty of organizations out here that people can join, or they can start a new organization. But the concept itself is addressed to individual persons, what they do each and every day, because you're with yourself more than you're with anybody else.
Right. And lastly, can white people also be victims of racism, white supremacy?
No.
Okay. Even though all white people are not racist.
No, they cannot be victims of white supremacy. They can be victims of injustice, but they can't be victims of white supremacy in a system that's designed for the white supremacists.
All righty. 2015 is coming up. TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio. Radio the way it should be heard. Thank you for all of 2014. Thank you, Mr. Fuller, and we will see you on the other side.
Neely Fuller, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com, the world's greatest radio.
The most important question in all racial matters is why. One should always ask it.
Radio, the way it should be heard.
You've got the power. The world's greatest radio. TalkTainmentRadio.com.